The next morning, Ellie yawns. Wynna notices Ellie's drowsiness and urges her to hold out a little longer. Today is the day Ellie will be introduced to the elders and vassals of House Schutz. After preparing Ellie, Wynna declares that she's all set. Ellie, experiencing a bit of culture shock, thinks to herself that she feels cuter than expected after dressing up. The maids excitedly comment on Ellie's cuteness. Wynna informs Ellie that Lord Damien will join her once he's ready and suggests waiting in her room. Ellie agrees and sits on the sofa, thinking to herself that being waited on is exhausting. She wonders when Damien will arrive. Just then, there's a knock on the door. Wynna opens it to reveal another maid. Wynna inquires about the maid's presence, and the maid explains that Viscount Corbinot wishes to meet Ellie. Surprised, Wynna questions Corbinot's arrival. Ellie, pondering the situation, assumes he wants to know more about her before the formal introduction. Wynna mentions that Ellie isn't quite ready, but Corbinot enters, dismissing the concern and declaring Ellie looks perfect to him. Ellie hesitates as she observes Corbinot and thinks to herself about his intent, noting that his eyes suggest he's here for more than just a casual visit. Despite her hesitation, she grins and reassures him that he didn't come at a bad time, mentioning she had just finished when he arrived. Corbinot smiles, commenting on his impeccable timing, and reveals that he brought something special to show Ellie. Corbinot's maid places the blue hope crystal before him, and he explains that it's a mana stone found exclusively in their territory. With a mischievous smile, Corbinot contemplates the idea that if Ellie is truly the daughter of a thief, he could catch her stealing something. Corbinot informs Ellie that the blue hope crystal will enable her to use magic, emphasizing that he brought it specifically for her with a smile. He then dismisses Wynna, requesting a private conversation with Ellie. Wynna hesitates, but Corbinot assures her that he has no intention of putting Ellie in harm's way. Ellie nods in agreement, prompting Wynna to leave. Ellie leans in to examine the crystal, thinking about its beauty and how it resembles Damien's eyes. However, Corbinot interrupts in a stern tone, telling her to stop looking at the crystal and asserting that it's not something she deserves to see, let alone covet. Bewildered, Ellie responds, and Corbinot, in a heavy tone, mentions his generosity, allowing her to admire it further but instructing her to return it to his maid once done. The maid bows at Ellie. Confused, Ellie starts to express her confusion, but Corbinot turns to leave, stating that he'll be going and hopes to see her again soon. Baffled, Ellie wonders about the fuss. The maid reveals that Corbinot chose the mana stone with Ellie in mind and asks if she'd like to look at it again. Just then, Wynna enters, informing Ellie that it's time to go as Lord Damien has arrived. Surprised, Ellie quickly hops from the sofa, causing the maid to flinch. Watching Ellie leave, Corbinot's maid thinks to herself, determined that Ellie cannot simply leave. She recalls Corbinot instructing her to wait for a chance to slip the mana stone into Ellie's pocket, confident that Ellie won't notice due to her perceived dim-witted nature. Wynna questions if Corbinot did anything strange, and Ellie reassures her that he didn't. Meanwhile, the maid discreetly hides the crystal and thinks it's now or never to slip the stone into Ellie's pocket. The maid announces her departure to Ellie, who responds with an okay. As the maid approaches Ellie, she nervously thinks to herself that she has to do it now. The maid theatrically feigns a fall, drawing attention with cries of distress. In the midst of the commotion, she skillfully places the crystal in Ellie's pocket, attempting to frame her as a thief. Satisfied with her covert action, the maid thinks she succeeded. Wynna, concerned, questions if Ellie is okay, suspecting the maid of causing the incident. Ellie reassures Wynna that she's fine. Wynna vows to teach the maid a lesson. The maid, relieved that they didn't notice, contemplates her success. Wynna instructs the maid to leave as May is waiting outside for Ellie. But Ellie contemplates something, then glances toward the maid and addresses Wynna with a momentary pause. Afterward, Ellie approaches the maid, grasps her, and comments on the apparent dirt on her clothes, making the maid flinch. However, Ellie assures her that she's fine, smiling and expressing her relief. Ellie then excuses herself, stating that she will be leaving. Following that, Ellie curtsies and addresses everyone with a greeting, introducing herself as Ellie. As people observe Ellie, there's a murmur among them expressing surprise that she doesn't have a last name. Some whisper about the unexpected nature of Lord Damien's bride being a commoner, leading to confusion among the members. Observing their reactions, Ellie thinks to herself that it's a milder response than she anticipated. In anger, Damien notes that they are taunting Ellie. The Duke, in a whisper, reminds Damien of their previous conversation, emphasizing the need for him to remain calm and collected until he returns to his rightful place. Damien clenches his fists, trying to contain his emotions. Corbinot addresses the Duke, requesting his excuse and expressing a desire to show him something. The Duke, inquiring about the urgency, suggests discussing it during a meeting. Corbinot explains that it concerns the Blue Hope crystal mentioned earlier, revealing he has finished polishing it and asks if the Duke could take a look now. The Duke reluctantly agrees, telling Corbinot to bring it to him. Corbeau instructs the maid to present the Blue Hope crystal to the Duke. However, the maid whispers something urgently in Corbeau's ear. Corbeau reacts with surprise and concern. The Duke, noticing the commotion, takes a step forward, inquiring about the situation. Corbeau reluctantly reveals that the Blue Hope crystal he intended to give the Duke is gone. Upon hearing about the disappearance of the Blue Hope crystal, others express surprise and curiosity about who last had it in their possession. The maid confesses that it was her, and Corbeau reacts with feigned anger, questioning her carelessness and demanding to know who touched it last. The maid admits that she showed it to Miss Ellie earlier, and Ellie didn't return it. Corbeau realizes it happened when he greeted Ellie and showed her the Mana Stone. Corbeau, addressing the Duke, expresses regret as he shares disturbing information he recently heard. He mentions the story of the thief who broke into Count Lational's manor, directing a glare towards Ellie. Other members react with shock, murmuring and expressing disbelief. They learn that Ellie's mother was the ignoble thief who committed the crime. The revelation sparks chatter among the members, and some insist that this matter cannot be ignored. The Duke contemplates acknowledging his suspicion when Corbeau brought up the Blue Hope crystal. Corbeau, with a mischievous smile, suggests searching Ellie for the stone. Ellie reacts with fear, asking for clarification. Corbeau entreats the Duke to allow him to search Ellie. Ellie, visibly uneasy, admits her mother was a thief, but vehemently denies taking anything. Corbeau dismisses her concerns, stating they're merely asking to check. Ellie reluctantly agrees but conditions it with a demand for an apology if nothing is found. Corbeau, expressing frustration, accepts her condition and asks the Duke for permission to search Ellie. The Duke questions why Corbeau is seeking permission since Ellie already agreed. Corbeau expresses gratitude. As the maid begins to search Ellie, she panics upon finding nothing and admits it's not there. Corbeau, in disbelief, questions her and insists she look carefully. The maid assures him that she did. Annoyed, Corbeau instructs the maid to step aside and decides to search Ellie himself. However, to his surprise, he shudders and admits the crystal is not there. Members whisper among themselves, expressing disbelief that Ellie didn't steal the crystal as Corbeau seems so sure. Frustrated and trembling, Corbeau angrily accuses Ellie of hiding the crystal. Ellie reacts with a cry, and Damien, witnessing the scene, becomes angered. The Duke intervenes, grabbing Corbeau's hand and expressing his inability to tolerate the ridiculous scene any longer. Ellie, in thought, is surprised that the Duke came to her rescue. The Duke challenges Corbeau, stating that his actions seem more wretched, questioning if he disagrees. Corbeau, flustered, denies the accusation, claiming he was concerned for the Duke's well-being. He attempts to divert attention, insinuating Ellie's suspicious nature. The Duke acknowledges the attempt at manipulation and directs his attention to Ant, ordering him to respond. Ant approaches Corbeau, requesting permission for a search. Corbeau, though hesitant, reluctantly agrees, claiming to have nothing to hide. Ant proceeds to search and rummage through Corbeau's belongings. To everyone's surprise, Ant discovers the Blue Hope crystal in Corbeau's pocket. Corbeau expresses astonishment, questioning how it ended up there. Corbeau, in a flustered state, insists to the Duke that he has no idea what is happening and pleads for belief in his innocence. Meanwhile, Ellie, wearing a smile, thinking about lightness of the Blue Hope crystal. Rewinding, as the daughter of a thief, Ellie swiftly grasps the maid's scheme. Realizing her pocket has become suddenly heavy, Ellie discreetly removes the Blue Hope crystal that the maid had planted on her. Ingeniously, she places the crystal back into Corbeau's pocket. Ellie thinks to herself how fortunate it was that both the Viscount and his maid were predictably dressed in thick clothes, considering the cold climate of the north. This made it possible for her to stealthily remove and return the Blue Hope crystal without them sensing its presence. The Duke addresses Corbeau, who shudders in response. The Duke declares that Corbeau should pay the price for his deception. Corbeau, fearful, pleads for mercy, and is instructed to take both Corbeau and his maid away. Despite Corbeau's pleas for mercy, he is dragged away. With a sense of regret, Ellie reflects on the difficult sight of witnessing someone face such consequences even if they were a bad person. Despite the unease, she acknowledges that it was necessary for their protection. The Duke calls Ellie's attention, causing her to jolt. He reminds her of the conditions she asked of them, and Ellie confirms that she requested an apology. The other members flinch in response. The Duke addresses the members, pointing out that they heard Ellie's request. The members shudder in embarrassment. They collectively kneel and express apologies, asking for forgiveness and mercy, acknowledging their discourteous behavior towards Ellie. The Duke informs the members that, under normal circumstances, he would have punished them immediately. However, since Ant is elsewhere, he suggests revisiting the matter after the meeting. The members express gratitude for the Duke's generosity, and he instructs the others to take a seat, which they acknowledge with thanks. The Duke redirects the discussion to the main topic, reiterating his intention to have the two children married. However, A concerned man raises the issue that it's forbidden for a noble to marry a commoner. The Duke acknowledges this, stating that's precisely why he called the meeting, to find a family willing to adopt Ellie as their daughter. Ellie and the members react with surprise upon hearing this. The Duke opens the floor, asking who would like to adopt Ellie. Ellie is surprised and laughs nervously, internally pondering the unlikelihood of a noble family wanting the daughter of a thief. The Duke, sensing hesitation, asserts that if no one steps forward, Ellie will have the choice. Ellie, taken aback, is tasked with making the decision, given that she will take the family's name. She hesitates before responding. Ellie recalls the taunts and disdain she faced in the past when people questioned her association with her daughters, deeming her a disgrace to their family name and expressing skepticism about her compatibility with their children. These memories reflect the challenges Ellie encountered due to her background. Sitting alone and feeling melancholic, Ellie is suddenly called by someone saying her name. She responds with a surprised "Mom." Her mother appears, offering comfort and reassurance. She acknowledges the difficulty but advises Ellie not to give up hope, assuring her that she will be loved wherever she goes. She gently pats Ellie and reminds her that from the moment she was born, she was loved more than anything in the world. Feeling melancholic, Ellie reflects on her initial resentment towards her mother for what seemed like a dishonorable life. However, she realizes that her mother was the only person who loved her unconditionally. Convinced that no one in her current situation would truly accept her as their daughter, Ellie contemplates being more like a guest in their home. She yearns for a family where she could truly belong. Just then, there's a knock on the door. A maid interrupts, apologizing for the intrusion and delivering an urgent message for Baron Amanta. The Duke inquires about the message, and as soon as the maid mentions Baroness Amanta, Baron Amanta abruptly stands up and apologizes to the Duke, stating he must take his leave. After his departure, there's speculation about the worsening condition of Baroness Amanta, with whispers suggesting it isn't easy for the Baron to deal with such matters. Contemplating, Ellie recalls hearing the name Amanta before. Other members express their opinion on Baron Amanta's efforts to develop his mind, noting the challenges he faces with the Baroness. Ellie excitedly exclaims that she has figured something out. In contemplation, Ellie connects the dots. She thinks about Baron Amanta, a nobleman who owns a small mine. She envisions Damien using a sword forged from a mineral discovered in Amanta's mine to achieve victory in battle. Considering the significance of wealth in the monster-infested north, Ellie makes a decision. She expresses her desire to be adopted by Baron Amanta to the Duke. The Duke considers Ellie's request, mentioning that he won't stop her if that's truly what she wants, although he hints that persuading Baron Amanta might be challenging. In a whisper, the Duke cautions Ellie that her tricks, effective on someone like Viscount Corbeau, won't work on Baron Amanta. Ellie, taken aback, responds with alarm upon hearing this. Contemplating, Ellie wonders why the Duke allowed her to secretly return the Blue Hope crystal to the Viscount and why he overlooked her efforts to help Damien meet him. She questions whether the Duke let it slide because he also stands to gain something from the situation. The Duke questions Ellie's confidence, leading her to think that he might be the only person in the world who truly understands her worth. Despite this, Ellie expresses determination, stating that she can do it and promising to show what she's capable of. The Duke nods in acknowledgement. Observing the flowers, Ellie and Damien share their thoughts. Ellie asks Damien for his opinion, and he expresses amazement at the beauty. Ellie reflects on the floral scenery, thinking it may not quite suit the Duke, but is pleased that Damien enjoys it. Maid Ivana informs them about a greenhouse at the end of the corridor, cautioning about the cold outside. Contemplating, Ellie realizes that they haven't heard from the vassals since, assuming the Duke scared them off, which she considers a good thing. She observes Damien attempting to catch a floating flower and happily thinks it must be his first time encountering a dandelion. Damien catches the dandelion, excitedly waving to Ellie and inviting her over, noting the flowers match the color of her hair. Ellie agrees, suggesting they find something that matches Damien as well. She quickly identifies a flower. Damien questions if that's his color, and Ellie reassures him, saying they match the color of his eyes. As they exchange smiles, Ellie reflects on Damien's newfound ability to smile. She then shares with Damien the news of her upcoming adoption by Baron Amanta. Damien, surprised, repeats the word adopted, seeking confirmation from Ellie. She affirms that she will be the daughter of Baron Amanta, prompting Damien to express concern about not seeing her anymore. Ellie reassures Damien that she'll only be taking the surname Amanta and will still stay with him. Damien, delighted, seeks confirmation, and Ellie reminds him of her promise. Witnessing Damien's smiling, Ellie, blushing, notes how he now smiles with his eyes. Ellie asks Damien if he has anything to share, and he explains that he was practicing with his sword, mentioning that real training begins the next day. Ellie acknowledges that it's their last day to play like this and suggests spending the rest of the day playing hide and seek, to which Damien expresses curiosity about the game. Ellie explains the rules of hide and seek to Damien, and his imagination visualizes the scenario with Ellie finding him. Excited, Damien enthusiastically agrees to play hide-and-seek, expressing his eagerness to participate. Ellie initiates a game of hide-and-seek, starting the countdown for Damien to hide. However, Damien panics and requests Ellie to wait, realizing that he can't leave the greenhouse as it violates the rules. After playing for a while, Ellie, worn out from the game, suggests heading inside as Ivana might be worried. Damien, still holding on to Ellie, agrees and expresses his tiredness. Ellie reminds Damien that the game is over, and he can let go now. Just then, they both become alert as they hear noises coming from the bushes. Startled, Ellie wonders what the noise could be, considering it might be one of Viscount Corbineau's vassals. Both Ellie and Damien, noticing a shadow approaching them, become scared. In fear, Ellie hugs Damien tightly and warns him to watch out. Ellie, gripping Damien tightly with fear, closes her eyes in anticipation. Confused by the absence of any alarming incident, she cautiously opens her eyes to find a lady sitting in front of them. It becomes evident that the lady is unwell, shivering from the cold and showing signs of distress. The lady stammers in fear, expressing her apprehension about the unfamiliar surroundings and the cold. Ellie, realizing that she doesn't belong to Duke Schuttz's vassals, becomes curious about her identity. Concerned, Ellie approaches the lady, asking if she's okay and offering assistance. Ellie, sitting beside the lady, contemplates her situation. Observing the lady's attire, Ellie deduces that she might not be a servant at the estate. Concerned about the lady's well-being, Ellie decides to lead her to the greenhouse, noticing how cold she is. Ellie realizes the delicate balance of being kind to avoid upsetting the lady further, recognizing the potential consequences of a forced approach. Ellie cheerfully introduces herself to the lady and notices the lady's confusion when addressed as Madam. Ellie speculates that the lady may suffer from occlumency, a condition where memories gradually fade. Understanding the sensitivity of the situation, Ellie contemplates the challenges of dealing with a condition that worsens with anxiety and has no known cure, likening it to dementia. Ellie places a scarf around the lady's neck, expressing concern about her cold hands. Trying to ease the situation, she invites the lady to join them in a warm place with beautiful flowers. The lady, intrigued by the idea of warmth, questions Ellie, who reaffirms the existence of the inviting location and seeks Damien's confirmation with a nod. Ellie and Damien work together to support the lady, ensuring she doesn't fall again. The lady, smiling at Ellie, accompanies her to the warm area. Ellie, concerned, inquires about the reason for the lady being outside in the cold and wonders if she was lost. The lady admits uncertainty, explaining that forgetfulness is common for her, and she frequently experiences memory lapses. Ellie inquires about the lady's name, but she struggles to recall. Suddenly, a man's voice calls out, "Vyra." Ellie is surprised, realizing the voice sounds familiar. The man addresses the lady as Vyra, expressing concern and frustration. The lady, now identified as Viera, seems apologetic and mentions getting lost. Baron Amanta arrives, urging her to come with him for safety. Ellie recognizes him as Baron Amanta. Vyra expresses concern about Marvin's response, and Ellie is taken aback, realizing that Vyra might be the Baroness. Marvin instructs Viera to follow him, emphasizing the need to return. Vyra apologizes sincerely. Marvin glares at Ellie, warning her not to use his wife's suffering for personal gain. Ellie hesitates and wonders if Marvin thinks she approached the Baroness intentionally. Damien defends Ellie, asking not to speak poorly of her. Marvin tries to clarify his statement to Damien, but Damien insists there's no misunderstanding and defends Ellie's kindness. Ellie is surprised by Damien's support, recognizing that Damien, despite the importance of Baron Amanta's mine, doesn't shy away from confronting the Baron, who was once a great knight, realizing the potential conflict, understands that Baron Amanta, despite not using a sword as often due to his age, is a seasoned master who will teach Damien swordsmanship. Fearing any disrespectful behavior towards Baron Amanta, Ellie feels the need to intervene and put a stop to the situation. Ellie reassures Damien to stay calm despite the tension. Marvin comments on Ellie's perceived knack for schemes, expressing understanding of why the Duke took her under his wing. Viera intervenes, expressing concern, but Marvin, angered, insists that Ellie's tricks won't work on him and emphasizes he has no intention of taking her as his daughter. He then urges Viera to leave with him. Ellie reflects on her suspicions that Baron Amanta wouldn't like her but didn't anticipate the extent of his dislike. She acknowledges that the Baron's misunderstanding is understandable. Now she's concerned that Damien has also fallen out of favor with Baron Amanta. Ellie advises Damien not to be so defensive with everyone. Damien questions why, as Ellie previously encouraged him not to let people step on him and to fight back. Ellie clarifies that it's only when directed at him, not for defending her. Damien wonders if he was wrong for getting mad when someone insulted Ellie. Ellie reflects on Damien's newfound understanding of emotions such as anger and sadness. Despite his previous struggles, he demonstrated resilience and fought back when insulted. Ellie acknowledges his progress and feels she can't retract her encouragement for him to stand up for himself. Ellie expresses pride in Damien for expressing his feelings, recognizing it as another step forward in his emotional development. Damien responds with a smile, acknowledging Ellie's support. Ellie contemplates that she doesn't want to hinder Damien's progress. While Damien might struggle with social interactions, she believes in his kind and pure nature, anticipating that he'll grasp complex feelings as she explains them to him. Despite her confidence, she decides it's essential to convey this message to Damien, just in case. Ellie instructs Damien that even if he feels the need to confront someone in anger, he must stop when she tells him to. Damien questions whether this applies even if Ellie is in danger, to which Ellie reassures him that won't happen, and she'll escape if it ever does. Damien agrees, and Ellie thinks about how sweet he is. Maid Ivana rushes towards them, calling out for Lord Damien and Miss Ellie. Ellie, seeing her approach in a hurry, wonders if Baron Amanta has already formally refused to adopt her. Maid Ivana, looking concerned, asks if they happen to see Baron Amanta. Ellie responds that they encountered him a moment ago with the Baroness. Ivana urgently instructs Lord Damien and Miss Ellie to avoid the Baroness if they come across her again. Damien questions why they need to avoid the Baroness, and Ivana explains that she suffers from an illness causing memory loss, making her behave like a child during forgetful episodes. Ivana emphasizes the uncertainty of the Baroness's actions during such moments. Ellie realizes that the situation isn't related to her adoption. She questions why the Baroness is unwell, and Ivana explains that the Baroness became ill after giving birth to her son, Sir Jarrett. Ellie then inquires about possible treatments for the Baroness's illness. Ivana advises Ellie to inform a servant if she encounters the Baroness again and emphasizes the importance of doing so. Ellie, however, remains uncertain about the situation. Ellie reflects on the Baroness's condition, noting that her illness, occlumency, doesn't seem severe during their encounter. Ellie questions whether leaving her alone is the appropriate solution for someone dealing with such a challenging illness. Marvin expressed his concern, emphasizing that he entrusted Vieira to the servants for her safety, never anticipating her sudden disappearance. Vieira responds with a heartfelt darling, to which Marvin acknowledges that he understands she may not be herself during those moments, expressing a sigh and revealing his sense of being at a total loss. Marvin reminisced about the joy he and Vieira felt upon learning about their impending parenthood. The anticipation of having a baby brought immense happiness after a prolonged wait. However, the joy turned to sorrow as Vieira's health rapidly deteriorated, following the birth of their son. Unfortunately, the illness she contracted proved to be beyond the capabilities of the Empire's doctors to treat. As time passed, Vieira's memory lapses became more frequent, causing distress. In a moment of frustration, Marvin lashed out at her, unable to contain his emotions. That very night, he found her asleep on a cliff near the castle. Marvin contemplates the possibility that Vieira's memory loss may be a subconscious desire to forget, speculating that his own desire for a child might have inadvertently burdened her. He reflects on the contrast between his longing for parenthood and Vieira's deep love for freedom, questioning if his selfish desires may have contributed to her struggles. Vieira reveals that a child saved her, prompting Marvin's inquiry about which child. Vieira mentions the blonde girl, recounting how she warmed her hands, shared her scarf, and guided her to a warm greenhouse. Vieira acknowledges the girl's kindness with a smile, referring to her as a little angel, grateful for the support that helped dispel the cold. Marvin reflects, pondering the rarity of seeing Vieira smile. Vieira suggests visiting the children together, expressing gratitude and a desire to apologize. Despite Marvin's initial suspicion about the child's intentions, he is swayed by Vieira's smile and nods in agreement. Ellie confronts Damien for an undisclosed reason, expressing disbelief. She then playfully compliments Damien's skin, comparing it to cotton candy's softness. Damien, taken aback, admits he doesn't know what cotton candy it is. Ellie enthusiastically promises to make it for him, drawing a parallel between the treat and his soft cheeks. Damien shyly suggests Ellie's skin is probably softer than his, but Ellie disagrees, inviting him to touch her cheeks, demonstrating how just like that. Damien, shocked, stammers a response as Ellie expresses concern for his well-being. Damien, attempting to divert the attention, playfully mentions Ellie's cheeks. Perplexed, Ellie wonders if her skin is truly that bad, contemplating her skincare habits. Just then, Roina enters the room, announcing the arrival of Baron and Baroness Amanta to see Damien and Ellie, leaving them both surprised by the unexpected visit. Marvin acknowledges the need for an apology, causing Ellie to hesitate with surprise. Marvin clarifies that he misunderstood the situation and extends heartfelt apologies, expressing genuine regret for any misconceptions. Ellie contemplates admitting her initial assumption of Marvin coming to provoke a conflict. As she mulls over what to say, she recalls Baron Amanta's delayed realization of the Mind Ore's potential due to concerns for his wife. Understanding the situation, Ellie smiles, realizing that by creating a conducive environment for the Baron to focus on his work, Damien's sword could be forged more efficiently. Ellie, addressing Marvin, requests a small favor as a gesture of accepting his apology. Marvin, open to the request, inquires about it. Ellie shares information about occlumency, stating that those who suffer from it can easily become confused and frightened, advising Marvin not to raise his voice at his wife to avoid exacerbating her fear. Ellie invites Vera for a walk, surprising her. Marvin questions if that was all Ellie wanted. Ellie confirms, expressing her desire to go on walks with the Baroness since she hasn't made many friends besides Damien. Considering Damien's busy training schedule, she hopes to befriend Vera. Damien offers to make time for Ellie's request. Ellie assures Vera that she won't be a bother and proposes keeping her company 3 times a week. Vera, feeling she might be the burden, hesitates. Ellie reassures her, expressing genuine appreciation for spending time together and suggesting visits to the greenhouse to share the beauty of various flowers. Vera takes a moment to think before smiling and expressing that it would be an honor for her to spend time with Miss Ellie. During breakfast, Ellie shares the story of how she ended up in His Grace's castle. Vera acknowledges the difficulty of deciding to come to the north. Ellie, feeling awkward, admits she's not used to adults speaking politely to her. She then reflects on her new surroundings, likening it to heaven compared to the orphanage, even though a few things like the crows are a bit scary. Ellie reflects while eating, noting that her current situation is immensely better than being mistreated in the orphanage. She anticipates capital flowing in soon. Vera, recognizing Ellie's difficult past, expresses sympathy and compassion by holding Ellie's hand. Touched, Ellie acknowledges the hardship with a simple yes. Ellie, with a smile, downplays her past, mentioning that some children at the orphanage were sweet, while others and the teachers were challenging. She corrects herself, stating that His Grace fixed everything, leading to Vera finding it peculiar, as His Grace usually doesn't intervene in such matters. Ellie reveals that Damien was saved by His Grace, who brought him from the orphanage. Vera reflects, suggesting that His Grace's intervention might be rooted in guilt. Uncertain about revealing this information, she decides to share it now while her memories are intact. Approximately 15 years ago, the Empire engaged in a significant war triggered by a prophecy received by the Great Temple Graphes. The prophecy foretold that a mystical power would restore glory to the Empire. This power was linked to a mysterious life force emanating from the World Tree. It became clear that nature itself was the origin of magic. Those residing near the World Tree were endowed with more potent mana, emphasizing the connection between beings and the powerful life force. The tribes residing near the World Tree possessed unique forms of magic. However, the sudden withering of the World Tree, despite the tribe's best efforts, resulted in various rumors. Some claim that the tribes were concealing the true situation to selfishly hoard the World Tree's powers, even though they were the ones responsible for saving it. The conflict escalated, leading to war between the imperial family and the temple over the Empire's fate. The late Duke Clyder and His Grace fought side by side during this war, forging a strong friendship. The Empire ultimately emerged victorious, suppressing the tribes. The return of His Grace was celebrated, but it wasn't a solitary return. He was accompanied by the late Lady Yuria. While chewing, Ellie contemplates the mention of Yuria, noticing the absence of Duchess Schutz in the book. Vera explains that Yuria was from one of the tribes. Surprised, Ellie questions how someone from the tribes became a duchess. Vera reveals that the Schutz family, known as the Devil's Progeny, has suffered from madness for generations due to an ancient curse. This curse is believed to extend to His Grace's lands, leading people to consider them cursed as well. The reason for His Grace's participation in the war likely stemmed from alleviating the madness afflicting the Schutz family. However, with Lady Yuria's arrival, His Grace's madness seemed to vanish suddenly. Ellie, curious, questions Vera about it. Vera speculates that the unique and intricate magic of the tribes might have played a role, adding a smile. She reveals that Lady Yuria and His Grace married and, despite frequent disagreements, deeply loved each other. Ellie, reflecting, expresses no surprise at the conflicts, while Vera emphasizes the profound love between the couple. Ellie reflects, realizing that Lady Yuria was the only one capable of freeing His Grace from generations of madness. Despite being from the tribes, bringing her along became a necessity for His Grace. Vera adds that wielding the magic of the tribes comes at a price. 3 years later, during the rebellion, Lady Yuria used her magic to break His Grace's curse on her own. Following the incident, His Grace distanced himself from everyone, except for continued correspondence with Duke Clyder. 2 years later, he learned of Duke Clyder's wife giving birth to a baby boy. This news prompted His Grace to open the gates of his castle for the first time. Ellie, realizing the connection, recalls that it was the night the Silders fell from the cliff. She understands why Duke Schutz feels guilty about Damien, thinking the tragedy of the Clyders was his fault. Feeling a sense of gloom, Ellie empathizes, stating that she can relate to the pain of losing someone close to her as well. Vera, concerned, checks on Ellie and wonders if she shouldn't have mentioned anything. Ellie reassures her, expressing sympathy for his grace. Vera understands, and Ellie, being comforted with a pat, changes the subject, mentioning that something about Vyra reminds her of her son. Surprised, Ellie learns that Vyra has a son. Vyra clarifies that they might not be friends since he's much older and occupied with business at her husband's mine. Ellie, intrigued, expresses a spark of interest, addressing Lady Amanta and suggesting the possibility of visiting the mine as well. In the mine, Jared Amanta expresses frustration, feeling the pressure to produce results quickly. He agonizes over refining a substance, fearing he won't bring joy to his ailing mother or gain recognition from his father. The prospect of disappointing his father by not being useful weighs heavily on him. Marvin questions Garrett's frequent sighs, and Jarrett, surprised, inquires about Marvin's presence. Marvin, asserting his right to be in his own mine, shifts the conversation to inquire about information on the ore. Jarrett apologizes, admitting he hasn't found out more. Marvin, with a glance, reassures Jarrett not to be hasty, advising him to take his time. However, Jarrett is determined to do his best and make Marvin proud, expressing his commitment. Just then, Ellie arrives, colliding with Marvin. Ellie expresses pain, and Marvin, recognizing her, questions the reason for her presence. Ellie, bowing, greets Marvin with a "Good day, my lord," accompanied by Vera. Vera admits to Marvin that she knew he wouldn't be pleased but wanted to visit with Ellie. Marvin expresses concern about the dangerous tools in the area. Meanwhile, Ellie, noticing a blue object behind Jarrett, is intrigued, describing it as sparkly and questioning if it's a weapon. Excitedly, she asks Jarrett if she can touch the sword. Jarrett, contemplating, notes that Ellie is the girl brought by his grace for Damien's future wife and remarks on her younger age than expected. He warns Ellie about the danger of swords, advising her not to touch it. Disappointed, Ellie acknowledges and apologizes for pestering him. Garrett offers to show Ellie something else, to which she expresses excitement. However, before anything happens, Marvin interrupts, but Vyra shakes her head to him. Jarrett introduces a monocle utilizing the power of a mana stone to Ellie, who expresses awe. He instructs her to hold it to her eye, and as she does, she exclaims in amazement but stumbles, feeling dizzy. Jarrett advises her to try closing one eye to alleviate the dizziness. Ellie winks as instructed, and Jarrett affirms it. Vyra, delighted while observing Ellie, comments to Marvin that it feels like having a granddaughter. Marvin, clearing his throat, responds, and Vyra playfully nudges him, implying the shared sentiment. Ellie approaches a box and questions its contents. Jarrett warns her not to touch, explaining that it contains unique ores discovered recently. He cautions that body heat causes them to harden immediately, and once stuck, they cannot be removed. Ellie reacts with a flinch, likening the unique ores to monsters. Jarrett questions if she has seen monsters, and she responds that she hasn't, but mentions Damien encountering them before coming to Schutz's castle. According to Damien, monsters are frightening and relentless once they grab onto you. While Damien is busy with his lesson, a knight notices something amiss and asks Damien what's wrong. Damien flinches, expressing the feeling that Ellie just mentioned his name. Jarrett laughs, agreeing with Ellie's comparison of the unique ores to monsters, noting that once they grab you, they never let go. However, he suddenly jolts, realizing he may have seen something similar when he was young. Recalling his past, a young Jarrett witnesses Marvin on horseback instructing the knights to return to the castle and ensure there are no monster remains in the rubble. While inspecting the scene, young Jarrett turns and notices a crystal, reaching out towards it. Suddenly, someone warns him not to touch it, identifying it as a rare monster with special properties. Marvin reacts with surprise, questioning the revelation of a monster. The lady explains that the crystal appears sparkly on the outside but becomes impossible to remove once it sticks to a person. She emphasizes that despite its pretty exterior, it acts like a monster, digging into a person's flesh. Marvin and Jarrett jolt in response to this revelation.